Okay. All right, so before we get started with today's content, I just wanted to apologize for last week's live stream. I know it was an epic failure. You got the audio, but you didn't get the video. I resolved that issue. I figured it out, okay? So I apologize. Going forward, this won't be an issue. However, all the content was covered in those supplement videos that I gave you guys on renderography, so at the very least, you had what you need.
On that note, I tried watching it on my way here, and it didn't want to work.
Which one?
The live stream.
Well, I just started it.
Oh, you
Just started like 2 seconds ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's why.
It said 15, it said 1:15, and right at 1:15, I clicked and nothing
Yeah.
happened.
Yep, it should be going now. I just hit the button, so it should be streaming live to the web. So Tomoko is going to my YouTube channel, and let me just show you. It's a little bit hidden. You know, YouTube, maybe, and this is a fault of YouTube, doesn't do a really fantastic job of reminding us gently where you can find the live stream for all of this stuff. So let me just show you very quickly how to get there. Let me just go to my channel page. There we go. And if you click on the home button, check it out. There's a little arrow here. And then if you go to feed, now it should show you, and see, look right there. It says live now. Live now. Okay, if you click on that, you can watch me talk. I don't know why you'd want to do it while you're listening to the class in person, but you could. You could. Echo. It would create an echo, so please turn your volume off, okay? We'll get this endless feedback loop that gets rather annoying rather quickly. Let's talk about what we're going to be going over and exploring today. From our conversation last week, we're starting to get into the habit of working with a scene that's comprised up of many, many items. And we're going to be animating each one of these items separately. The rig that we created last week allowed us to create kind of a more simplified version of a very complex machine. Each one of those chain links was animated, I think, a little bit more easily because of the rig that we made. Okay. Last week we talked about our first simple relationship within inside of the motosphere, and that was called the parent-child relationship. Today we're going to extend upon that and talk about some additional constraints that will allow us to make some pretty neat interactions between different items in the scene. So we're going to talk about directional, rotation, and path constraints today, and I think we're going to have a whole lot of fun. In addition, we're also going to begin to expose certain channels within our rig on the surface. We're going to create really, if you really think about it, a custom interface for our rigs, because at times, you know, we don't need to have access to every single channel of animation, okay? Maybe we only want to give our animators access to one thing. For example, last week we were working on our chain, and many of you guys were finding that on each chain link, you are only really rotating that chain link along one axis, right? Either the X or the Z, depending on the orientation of the chain in the scene, right? Well, instead of giving the animator access to the X, Y, and Z, we can just expose a single channel within our rig and force them to animate just on that one channel, okay? Rigging is in Modo, rigging is an incredibly powerful system that ultimately allows us to craft some really amazing systems that give us a tremendous amount of control. To help us out this week, we're going to be striving to do a couple things. Our homework assignment this week is going to be really kind of fun. I like this homework assignment. It's alien invasion. People of Earth, defend yourselves. Aliens are attacking. With a tiny turret, yeah. So you're going to be making a really fun, very simple animation that involves a really cool spaceship model that I'm giving you guys, and you're also going to craft and create your own little space-age science fiction turret from some of the free stuff that comes with Modo. And your job is to animate this little spacecraft flying around your scene, and then I want you to animate the turret and then fire some bullets at it and try to shoot down your spacecraft. Okay. More on this later. It'll be a fun assignment. And through this entire thing, you'll kind of get a hands-on application of how to work with constraints, specifically directional constraints, position constraints, and path constraints. Those are the three that we're really going to jump up and down today a lot. Okay? So we'll come back to this and talk about it a little bit later. I've placed a couple things in the resources section of this week's course page that I want you to download. There's 2 files that you'll need. The working with constraints moto luxology file is going to be the file that I'm going to be using during the lecture portion of this class. So I would encourage you to follow along. It's physically the exact same LXO. Okay, so you have exactly what I have. Jump ship. This machine no worky. It's just going to restart over and over and over and over again.
Okay.
I'd pick a different machine. Yeah, it's very much broken. It's very much broken. So please download the Working with Constraints model file. And also, for your homework this week, there's the alien spaceship model file that I want you guys to use. Now, you don't have to use this one if you don't want to, but you know, in the early stages of this class, I don't want you guys to have to really model anything. I want you to focus on the rigging portion, so that's why I'm giving you all these separate assets for us to play with. Okay? So please make sure you download and save both of those model files to your desktop. All right, let's jump back over to Moto and begin. I mentioned earlier that we're going to be working with a very specific file. Let's just go through some of the basics of that file. There are 3 items that we're going to be exploring over the next hour or so. We got a little arrow, and then we got 2 little targets, and they're 2 just kind of little circles, little cylinders. So nothing too fancy. Okay. Oops, there we go. All right, rock and roll. Nothing too fancy. We got a big target. We got a little one, which is just kind of a scaled down version of the exact same thing. And then we have our little arrow. And bear with me just for 2 seconds. Since I made some changes to my model file, there we go. Just want to get it back to its default pose. Now, we're going to start with the targets, okay? And as always, we need to go over into setup mode, okay? Setup mode is where we want to hang out to understand all the rigging portions of this stuff. Come on in, Mr. May. We're literally just getting started. Perfect timing. I think it's hilarious that we have 3 Alexes in one class. 4 Alexes in one class. I'm sorry, Mr. Ty. I think that's awesome. Huh? Will all the Alexes please raise their hand? That's fantastic. I'll leave it up to you guys to figure out how you want to label each Alex. Alex number 1, yeah. 7 of 9, yeah. I am 1 of 4, yeah. Resistance is futile, yeah. Okay. To get you caught up, Mr. May, I've downloaded this project file from Renderography. It's called Working with Constraints, so if you'd like to follow along, I would encourage it. Okay, so last week we talked a little bit about the role of the item, and specifically how center points are going to be used inside the animation system. Okay, now I got 2 items going on right now, and help me out. Let me turn off my grid just to make it a little bit easier for you guys to see what's going on. Okay. When I select that outside ring, a couple things change, right? Help me out. What inside the interface represents the center point for our object? What does our center point look like? Yeah, absolutely. It's that thing right there. That's the center point, okay? And the center point is really kind of what is moving, what is rotating, what is and scaling inside of our scene, okay? And we just happen to have a whole series of polygons, edges, and vertices kind of attached to that center point. So this really is the thing inside of the Moto system that's moving and animating, okay? Which is why it's the most important element inside of the entire Moto animation system. We are, in many ways, animating center points, okay? Is there a way for us to go in and manipulate the location of these center points separate from the actual the polygons?
Make a locator.
You could. We could make a new locator, which is a separate item. I want to control this item's center point.
Press 7 on the keyboard and then press the move key.
I love it. I love it. Okay. The number 7 on our keyboard is going to activate the center selection set. If you check it out. This is something that's really only seen and kind of brought to the surface in the Setup tab. Okay, it's right there. If you're in other modeling workspaces, or excuse me, if you're in other workspaces inside of Modo, this isn't necessarily going to be in that workspace, which again is why we should be doing all of this kind of rigging stuff in the setup window. All the rigging tools are there, all these selection sets are there. It is custom made for setup and rigging operations, okay? What? Okay. So go into centers, right? And now, check it out. And this, it's a little deceiving, and I like this, but then I kind of don't like this. It's kind of confusing for folks that are just starting to learn the system. The moment we go out of item mode and into centers mode, the orange outline surrounding our big ring here has completely gone away. So just kind of visually, it looks like we've dropped the selection, but we haven't. Because if you notice, there's one thing that's still persistent. It's the center point visible in the scene itself. So now that I'm in centers mode, I can very quickly go in and select our center point. Now, I wish I could zoom in and make that icon bigger. Oh, I can do this. There we go. Ah, in your face, Modo. I win. I will always win. So just remember, in order to manipulate and change your center point, you have to select it, okay? Just going into the center selection mode isn't enough. The same selection rules that we've been working on up until now apply with centers. Okay. Single click, single left click. Well, if you hold down the control key, you're going to be adding an additional item to your selection. I wouldn't recommend doing that with center points, okay? One of the things that I've learned about rigging is that you have to be incredibly, and I mean incredibly methodical about your process, okay? There is a sequence that we have to follow. Deviation from that sequence, even by one step, is going to have an impact on the final result of your rig, okay? You're going to get in, this is going to become so directly apparent when we start doing characters, okay? So get used to thinking in a sequence and following that sequence as much as we can. Be methodical. The more you think like a machine, the easier this whole thing is going to work, okay? John, comment, question.
When you zoom in, it's like going inside your vessel. It disappears. You just hit control, and then the plus sign or minus sign, the zoom in.
Yeah, that's what I did here. I just held down, I have a modifier, and I'm not actually zooming in my viewport. I'm just scaling the image within inside my screen. So this is an OS level operation, what I just did there. If we were to physically zoom into the viewport, oops, that's the wrong keyboard shortcut. There we go. See how it always kind of remains the same size? Okay. But you can, I think there is a keyboard shortcut that allows you to change the size of all of those icons in your preferences. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, then it looks like your center point is large. Well, in this case, it's larger than the actual model file in the scene. Okay. Yeah, that's going to happen just depending on the screen size and the model that you're working with. Okay. So we know that we can select our center points, and then of course we can absolutely change a couple of their important parameters. Okay, we can move them around. Okay. And moving the location of our center point is going to have a pretty big effect across the entire animation of this item now, okay? Because remember, whenever we animate something, we are technically animating the location, rotation, and scale of the center point. So if I was to activate the rotate tool right now in item mode, let's just do it real fast for my big target, what would happen? Yeah. I've kind of created like a little hinge here. Check it out. Look where the location of my tool handles have shown up. A lot of people get confused when they start working with items as to why the location of their tool handles are showing up in a weird kind of spot within the scene. The location of your tool handles are always, and I mean always, 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 going to show up at the center point for that item. Huge difference from when we're modeling in like one of the component modes, right? When you're working in vertices, edges, and polygons, I can put my tool handle anywhere and it's good to go, right? It's pretty easy. The automatic action center allows us to do that. Well, when you're working with items, it's always going to show up at the location of your center point, okay? This is something that we have to manage, and it at times can become a little bit of a nightmare. It becomes this uncontrollable beast if we're not aware of the role of the center point. Yeah?
Can you use center points of like backdrop images or like other stuff, or does it only work for like items? Or...
Is a backdrop image an item?
I guess so.
So can we move the center point?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
All items have a center point. If it has a center point, we can move it. Yeah.
Sick.
Yeah. Okay. Couple other things that I just want to remind people of, all right? Since managing our center points can be a little bit of an issue from time to time, let me make some suggestions for you, okay? Because in a couple weeks, you're going to start creating your own custom models for your animations that you're going to be crafting in this class, okay? And, you know, I know that you guys are working on outside projects, okay? So I want to give you a couple pointers on how to kind of manage and mitigate some of the issues that are surrounding center points, okay? Whenever you're modeling something, I'm old school. I truly fundamentally believe that you should be modeling that object at the origin of the scene, okay? That's a biggie, right? Modeling at the origin allows the tools inside of Modo to work a little bit more efficiently. It gains access into some additional modeling procedures that just make our lives a whole lot easier. I mean, everything works better if we're at the origin, okay? However, there are times when you don't model away from the origin of the scene, or when you model away from the origin of the scene, okay? I'm going to go into my polygon component mode here real fast, and I'm going to start moving the polygons around, okay? So I'm not moving the item, I'm moving the actual physical polygons, okay? So if you model away from the origin of the scene, which happens from time to time, just be aware of the location of your center point, okay? Where is your center point always, and I mean always, 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 initially going to be created in place whenever you work on a new mesh item? At the origin, absolutely. Be aware of this. You have to be aware of this, okay? You have to know that the center point by default is going to be at the origin of the scene, okay? So if you make something else, you make a custom model, okay? And it's looking awesome, it's working out the way you want it to, okay? And then it comes time to animation, and you're like, okay, cool. Let's pretend that these are like the wheels of a car or something, all right? So maybe you want that this entire item over here to rotate around itself, okay? If I go into item mode, boom, activate the rotation tool, this is going to happen, right? This is going to happen, okay? Boo, okay? This is not what we want. I want the center point for for this item to be in the center of the wheel. But I can't move the wheel, right? Because it's in a very specific place in relationship to the model. So what do I have to do? I got to move the center point. Yeah, I got to move the center point, okay? Yes, sir?
When you also said that where's the thing originally, when you make your mesh, is it in the XYZ center also?
It can be. It can be. If you're doing a good job, I would say, you know, construct that mesh at the origin of the scene, but at times that's just not going to be an option for us.
The mesh to make it with the center at the XYZ point?
Can you say that again?
Is it defaulted so anytime you make a new rig or a new model?
No, check it out.
So you go to XYZ?
I'll create a new mesh item here, okay? New mesh item, look where the center point for that mesh item automatically went, the origin of my scene. I can just open up my model tab here, create a box, boom. Now that model, the actual polygon, is offset from the center of my scene, okay? There will be situations where you can't move that object, okay? Oftentimes, we model things in their final resting place, okay? So what we have to do is that we have to move the center point to that location in the scene, okay? For example, keep in mind that what this is in your, you know, this is an art class, okay? So use your imagination, okay? You can use your imagination here, it's okay. You're amongst friends, I'm not going to judge you, all right? Even though I just said think like a robot, but, you know, you can do both, you can do both. All right. So these are the wheels of a car. I've modeled the wheels of my car in very specific locations, okay? Imagine in between those two circles, there's an entire car body. So I can't take one of those wheels and do like, you know, select all the polygons and then do like center selected, right? I'll move the polygons to the origin of the scene, right? And then I'll have to move the item back where I need it to go. We don't want to do that, right? Because there's a very, very small chance that I'm going to move that item back to its original position perfectly, okay? So we need to change the location of our center point, Okay. Luckily for us, Modo has some really cool tools that allows us to interactively change the location of our center point without having to do a whole lot. Okay. I love that Modo has an intelligent system within it. Okay. And one of the things that makes Modo special, and one of the things that makes Modo have such a redonkulously powered rigging system, believe it or not, is the work plane. Okay? The work plane is a pretty special element within inside of Modo. Now, I've talked a lot about the work plane, and if you've taken GCOM 402 and 424, you know that the work plane has an invaluable role in the modeling process, right? What is it? So that's one of the things you can do with it, but what is the work plane?
The work plane is kind of like an area field where it's kind of like a 3D area field.
Absolutely, okay. Take that one step further. When you see the work plane, what does it look like? Yeah, a light gray grid that shows up in your scene. Right now in the setup tab, the work plane has been disabled. FYI, a lot of people get confused as to what in the world that little white cube in the compass is. What is it?
The right angle.
Yeah. No, it's not the right angle. Okay. It's actually a representation of the orientation of the work plane. Okay. That's the work plane. Right now, even without its visibility on, I know the work plane has been snapped to the XY axis. Okay. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. Okay. The work plane is nothing more than a grid. It's kind of like any of our traditional three-dimensional grids, but this grid moves. We can change its location. It's an incredibly powerful tool on the modeling side, but it's also an incredibly powerful tool on the rigging side. Since it's a grid, pop quiz, does it have a center point? Yes, it does. And that's why the work plane is so powerful when it comes to the rigging system. Because now I can align the work plane to a very specific point in my scene and use the center point of that grid as a snapping guide for a number of different things.
Is the center point the origin?
Now we're getting into kind of like an existential like mode here. Okay, this is really kind of yes. In my mind it is. Okay. Let me show you a couple things about the work plane and how moving the work plane makes this just awesome. The work plane is so invaluable for me, I can't model without it anymore. I can't rig without the work plane. It is that cool in my opinion. I wish Luxology would like license this technology to like Maya and 3D Studio Max, because I really believe that all 3D applications should have this at its core, because it really is invaluable. For me, this is worth the price of admission. Okay. All right. In the Setup tab, it's really kind of funky and odd. Well, it's a funky and odd work environment, and one of the things that we don't get is the visibility of the work plane. You're more than happy to turn it on, you know, as if you hit the O key. It's under the visibility section. There it is, work plane. You can turn it on and off. I generally find the visibility of the work plane kind of to get in the way. I like knowing it's there. It's a powerful tool, but it's just kind of cluttered because now we have these white lines all over the place, okay? So I often turn it off, or I turn the visibility of it off. You can't actually turn its function off in the environment. It's always on, okay? And it's always influencing everything. One of the cool things that they've done inside of 601 and they've amplified it in 701 is that in the upper right-hand portion of that little top menu bar, you have a work plane drop-down menu, okay? Inside of that menu, this is where we're going to start to manipulate the work plane, but they've given us one new kind of visibility option that's really kind of handy, okay? And it's draw axis, okay? This is going to create a little compass indicator on the actual work plane itself. Let's do it. Draw axis, okay? And there it is, okay? Now, this is where, you know, Alex said is the origin of the scene, the center of the work plane. Yes, it is, okay? If you look at where the axes, those little arrows for the work plane are currently residing, where is it? The origin of our universe, right? So whenever we do like a center selected, we're not actually centering those polygons, edges, and vertices to the center of our scene. we're actually aligning them to the center of our work plane, whose default location is the center of the scene. Make sense? Yeah, all right. So with draw axis on, we get a really good indicator as to where the center of the center of the work plane is in its current form. Now, because we have a center point on our work plane, we can use it as an interactive snapping guide for us. The Moto toolset is incredibly tuned in to the location of our scene, okay, or of our work plane, excuse me. So I want to change its location within the scene. I want to put the center of my work plane in the center of my large ring over here, okay? Does anyone know how to do that? Yeah.
Can you just move the item stuff without the center point?
I'm sorry, say again?
Did you move the item stuff without the center point following it?
I moved the polygons. I went into the big ring and I moved the polygons.
Oh,
Okay? The item center point is still in its original location, which is where? The origin of the scene. Okay? So if you're following along, grab the polygons of your large ring, and then move them somewhere else. Okay? Check this action out. This is why the work plane is the bee's knee, in my opinion. Okay? I just love, love, love the work plane. Temporarily, I'm just going to disable the grid so you guys can see what's going on. So that right there, this is the indication, the indicator of the center of our work plane. Check it out. If I go into my component mode on my little target item, so I'm selecting polygons now, or my big target, might help if I'm on the right item, there we go. And I select that loop, okay? That inside loop, okay? Yeah, absolutely. If I want to change the location of my work plane, we initially have to create a selection, okay? Everything in Moto begins and ends with a selection. It really, really does, okay? So I've selected that inside loop. At the center, we're going to ask the computer to analyze that selection and place the work plane at the center of that selection, which is going to be what? In the middle of the ring, absolutely. So check it out. I'm going to go back up into my work plane tool options up over here in the upper right-hand corner. And what I'm going to do is choose Align Work Plane to Selection. Okay? Let me zoom out so you guys can see the product of this operation. Boom. Now what happened?
You moved the work plane to the selected item.
The selected geometry. And it's placing the center of my work plane in the center of my ring. Now that we have a grid whose center is aligned with the center of our ring, we can use that new center point as a snapping guide for the item center. I feel as though I just said center like 8 times in the course of one sentence, so I apologize, okay? I apologize, okay? Once you see it in action a couple times, you'll probably start to understand, okay? All right, so I need to manipulate the center point of my big target. So if I go into my center selection set and select the center point, which is way out over here, and just to kind of prove that we haven't really changed anything on the item list, let's just rotate my item, okay? There it is, nothing's changed, okay? Nothing's changed, it's in the exact same orientation within the scene that we had before. The only thing that we've changed is the location of the work plane, that's it, okay? So with that item selected, I can choose its center point. There we go. Select the item, go into my center selection set, and select my center point. Okay? With that center point selected, we can now go into one of our setup tools. Okay? And check it out. Yeah. So the item isn't moving. Okay, so you got your center point selected, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So are you trying to move your item?
Yeah, right here.
Yeah, we're going to move that point over there, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So you're getting ahead of me. Yeah, we're almost there. Okay. So keep that center point selected though, Kaylee. Okay, because we want to edit its location. Now, what we don't want to do is this. Okay. This is what I implore you to not do. Okay, and I know you do it. Don't tell me you don't. Okay, Let's do action center set to, oh, I don't know, selection. Don't do this. Why not? It's not perfect, okay? Don't eyeball it, all right? Everyone thinks that they can eyeball it. Everyone's like, oh, I'll get close. Okay. No, you don't get close. There's no, you get perfect, accuracy, precision. That's what we want, okay? So don't eyeball it. Yeah, question.
Why did you select only the inside? Why couldn't you select all of them instead?
You could have. You could have. I think at times, so what John's asking is, like, why did I select and align my work plane to the inside polygons, okay? Why didn't I do this? Just select everything, align work plane to selection, and I'm on my way. You could have. And if you look carefully at the result that we got, it's almost identical to what we had before. I would argue that it probably is identical to what we had before.
You would cheat it, but when it snapped it over there, the Y went south. Like it.
That's fine. That's fine. Yeah, and the same thing happened on mine too. And what Mr. Miller is talking about. Watch the orientation of my work plane when I just select those inside polygons and align my work plane to that. Boom. The global axis, okay, is different. Is different. Yeah, Y is kind of off kiltered a little bit. Z has been flipped around, okay? So you have to be careful with this, okay? The center of my work plane is where I need it to be, and that's all I care about. Right now, I don't really care about the local orientation of the center point. I just care about its position, okay?
So if you had something symmetrical on the inside, something like odd shape on the outside, if you selected all polygons,
It would give you a weird result, yeah. It would give you a weird result. Okay. One other thing about when you change the work plane, all of your orthographic viewports are now going to be different, okay? Because the orthographic viewports are choosing their orientation within our three-dimensional scene based on the local orientation of our work plane. For example, okay, if I look at this thing from the top, well, the top's a bad example. Okay, the front, that's backwards, okay? That's backwards, okay? Oops. You can get some really funky orientation, so your orthographic perspectives are not going to behave as they normally would, okay? Because they draw their orientation from the orientation of the work plane. All right, so now that we got our work plane where we want it to be, in the dead center of our circle, we can start manipulating the center point of our ring, and that's really where we're after. So let me go back into item mode and then over into centers. And this is kind of a habit that I've gotten into personally. I always go into item mode, I select my item so I know exactly which one I'm working with, and then I go into centers mode. So I know that the item that I'm working with is directly related to the item that I previously selected, okay? Think like a machine, think like a machine. You're robots here, okay? Sequence. With my center point selected, check it out. In the Setup tab, in the Setup window, and they really should find a better name for that because that is ripe for confusion. Okay, so I'm in the Setup tab. Down under the, oops, did I not have my center point selected? Yep, there we go. Okay, so in the match and align, or actually in the set position, excuse me, the set channel, what we're looking for is to work plane position, okay? This is great. This is great, because now we're going to take the selected item, or excuse me, the selected center point, and move it to the location of the work plane, okay? So let's just do it real fast. Yoink, there it is. Boom. And it moved my center point from the origin of the scene to the center of my circle, okay? Did it mess with the orientation of the center point? No, it left it where it was. It just influenced the transform, the position values of our center point, okay? Pretty cool, huh? Pretty cool.
So what's the difference between the center position button and the one we just used?
So the center position button in the modeling tab, right? Yeah. Center selected. This is something that you traditionally kind of only want to do for components, vertices, edges, and polygons. For items, an item center point, you want to do that match and align thing, okay?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, all of those. Those are really dedicated for items. In my opinion, the model tab is all about working with components, vertices, edges, and polygons, all right? The setup tab is all about working with items, okay? And their associated center points. So what have we gained in this process? Well, we have been able to model the orientation, or excuse me, we've been able to model this specific piece where it needs to be in relationship to the rest of our fictitious car, okay? And we've also moved its center point to where it needs to be so that we get the proper rotation, moving, and scaling of that object when it comes time for animation, okay? It's a fast way for us to move center points with accuracy and precision. It's great. It's great. Okay? Now, one thing that you have to be very careful of when you're working with the work plane and moving its orientation around is that as soon as you're done with this command, okay, you want to make sure that you reset your work plane. Okay? Reset it back to its original configuration so that it doesn't accidentally screw up anything that's downstream from this modeling operation. All right? And now we got what we want. Okay? However, whenever we move the center point, that edit is preserved in the position channel, right? Or the transform channels. Okay? So what do I have to do to my center point to make it think that its current location is its home? Get 0 down, right? What would happen if I hit reset? It would move back. It would move back to 0, 0, 0 in the scene, which is the origin, okay? To illustrate that, let me show you what I'm talking about. If I was to reset its position, boom, everything moves back, okay? If I was to 0 the position, it would stay in its current location, but all of these values would be returned to 0, okay? This is its new home. This is its new setup pose. Yeah? Nope. As soon as you do it, gone. So be careful. Be careful. Undo is always available to you. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. But if we wanted to get it back to the origin of the scene, how could we do it? Just based on what we've talked about right now, how can I take that center point and its associated item and move it back to the origin of the scene?
Do the reverse of what you just did.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. We're going to do the exact same thing, but in kind of the in reverse order. Okay. So, and in this case, we don't necessarily need to move the center point, but if I do have the item, check it out. Then we go. So a couple things. Under this match and align position here, we have this align to work plane and then to work plane position. This can be confusing, so let me kind of help you kind of decode what the difference between the two are. Okay? If we do align to work plane, this is something that we do at the item level. Okay? To work plane position is something that you really want to do for center points. Okay? So if I do align to work plane with my item selected, boom. It's going to give me a little popover and say, which ones? Orientation, X and Z, and it didn't do it. Why didn't it do it? Maybe I have that backwards. Orientation. Here, let's just do to work plane position, and now we're back. Okay. Now we're back to square one. Okay. Then if I reset it right now, where would it go? Which direction on screen, left or right? Left, right. It would go back to where it was a moment ago. Okay? Why do you know that? Is there anything inside of our interface that tells you it will absolutely go back to the left? Not so much the work plane, but remember the Properties tab is going to include all the information and all the transform edits that we made. Okay? And you can see under position X, it's been moved 1.135 meters.
You press items left, right?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
You use item to select the whole area, right?
Item, I'm in item selection mode, yeah.
And you did align to work thing?
Or to work plane position. And I believe if you look carefully there, you can also do to work plane rotation. Yeah, to work plane rotation. So you have control over moving the position of that item or the rotation values to match the orientation of the work plane. Let's take a look. All right. No, you hit to work plane position right below, Kaylee.
Oh.
Get out of there. Cancel it. Now, your work plane is already at the center of your guy. Reset your work plane. Remember, that's the landmine. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
reset it. Boom. See how it goes back to the center of the scene?
Oh, okay.
Now, if I wanted to move this one back to the center,
Then I click.
no. Hit cancel for me. To work plane position.
Okay, gotcha. Nice.
Okay. Questions so far? Drop my pen. Okay. So let's kick this up a notch. Up until now, we've just been moving items around the scene and becoming a little bit more familiar with the tools that we need to kind of have mastery on to really understand and enable the items to have kind of like their proper setup, right? Because believe it or not, centering item center points is going to be a thing for us as riggers. It is. It's kind of a thing, okay? Since we know the importance of the center point, understanding how to manipulate them with a little bit of accuracy is a big, big deal, okay? I'm going to just reset the location of my little circle here. There we go. And I'm also going to turn off the axes of my work plane just to kind of clean things up here. And now we're going to start working with both of these rings, okay? Because at times, well, let me rephrase how I'm beginning this statement, okay? What if I wanted to animate these guys? What if I wanted to animate the location of the big ring and have the small ring come along for the ride, okay? How can we do it? We could parent them, but they're away from each other right now. They're away from each other. So if I was to parent them in their current configuration within our three-dimensional scene, what would you imagine is going to happen? Yeah. So if I go little target on top of big target, any change that I make to my big target, right? The little guy is going to come along for the ride. Okay. So that kind of works, but in my mind, what I'm truly after here is that I want the little ring on the inside of my big ring, okay? Now, I could go through the process of centering everything together like I just did. That's kind of a little bit of an issue, right? Maybe I absolutely need to have this ring in that location within my scene. I can't move it back to the origin. I can't, it's got to stay there, okay? And I want the little ring to go on the inside of the big ring, okay? That's the goal. And I want to animate this, okay? I want to animate my big ring like, cruising around the scene, all right? Now for this example, I only want these two objects to share their location, okay? I don't care so much about the rotation parameters at the moment. I just care about their location within the scene. So one of the things that we have access to here in Modo is a really cool system called constraints. Constraints is kind of the next evolution of these relationships that we've been crafting over the last week. We did parent-child, okay? And what were some of the advantages of working with a parent-child relationship?
Wherever the parent goes, the child follows.
Absolutely. Can we move the child independently from the parent?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Worked perfectly for our chain because we were able to create a very complex animation quickly because the parent chain is going to influence all of the child chain links. Okay, we saw this in action. I still have my parent-child relationship active on my scene, so anywhere that my parent goes, the child goes with it. However, I can still control the child separately from the rest. Okay. In certain situations, this is bad. This is wrought with danger, okay? At times, maybe I want to have both of these completely attached to each other. I don't want my animator at all to influence the location of that center point, okay, or of the inside ring, excuse me.
So you could disable that?
You can. Well, it's not so much disabling, we're linking. We're going to link some channels together, okay? The next evolution of our relationships, these constraints, are basically going to start linking individual channels. With the parent-child relationship, we were linking items, right? We were connecting the big ring item to the small ring item in its entirety. And all three of the transform channels on the parent are going to influence all three of the transform channels on the child, okay? Case in point. So here's the parent, the big ring. I move it, child moves. I rotate it, child rotates. I scale it, child scales, okay? We're influencing all three sections of the transform, okay? What if I only want to influence one of those? Thus enter the role of constraints. Now, constraints are really fun, okay? I'm going to hit undo a number of times here to kind of put my scene back to its configuration that it was in a couple steps ago, okay? So let me just hit undo. Oh, shoot. There's an easier way of doing this. I'm just going to reset all, boom, okay? And I'm going to reset that one, reset all, boom. Oh, wait, hold on a sec. I forgot these guys were parented. Let me grab this out of here. Let me reset the position. Shoot, here we go. I'll grab my little guy, I'll reset all, and now we're back to where it was. The little one's on the right, the big one's on the left, okay? I want to link just the rotation, just the position of these two objects together, okay? Now what's going to happen is that this is going to override the location of the center points. A position constraint is going to take the center point of the child, and it's going to move it to the center point of the parent, okay? Let me show you what I'm talking about. You can find your constraints inside the modifiers section of the setup toolbar, okay? So here we go, modifiers, okay? And here we go. We have a whole section here called constraint. Now, we're not going to go through all of these today, but we are going to talk about position, direction, and path, because those are kind of like the all-stars of the constraint world. They're really, really cool, okay? And you'll like working with all three of these. They're going to give you a level of control that you have not experienced yet. So let's rock and roll, okay? In order for a constraint to work, we have to have some items selected. I already have my big guy selected, so I'm going to hold down the shift key and grab my small guy, my small ring. The moment I grab that second item, you can see that the constraints over there on the left-hand portion of the screen become ungrayed out and that are now active. So what we want to do is that we want to apply a position constraint. Now the position constraint is going to align automatically for us the locations of both items at their center point. Let me show you what it looks like, and then it'll probably be a little bit more obvious, okay? Okay, here we go. So let's apply the position constraint. I had my fault. I always do this because it's a different selection system from what I'm used to. So you have to select the child first. My bad, I forgot to mention this. And then select the parent. There we go. Okay, child first, then the parent. So basically, I want to move the small ring to the big ring. I select the small ring first, the big ring second. This selection order is important because it won't work. I mean, you'll get the opposite effect if it's the other way around. So now when I do position constraint, boom. Look what's happened. What happened?
The small circle went to the center point of the big circle.
You got it. The small circle went to the center point of the big circle automatically for us. Cool, huh? Okay. Let's show what we've gained in this process. Anywhere the big circle goes, small circle is going to come along to the right. Okay. However, if I try to move the center one, what's happening? I'm trying to move the little guy. It's not moving. Its position channel has been overridden. Okay? Its position information is being completely driven by the position information of the big one. Okay? However, what would happen if I tried to rotate this? It works. It works. Okay? It works. I love this. Because now we've linked just the position channels together. That's all we've done. Okay? Now this is really cool because what if I want to have, what if I wanted to have a little bit more of a complex animation where I have my big ring like doing this motion, okay? And then I could have the center guy rotating independently from the rest. Now I only have 4 keyframes to manage, opposed to about 16 keyframes that would drive the exact same animation without this relationship together. And I know precisely that these are always going to be sharing the exact same space, okay? Now, physically, what's gone on the back end of this is that the center point of our little guy has been moved, okay, to the center point of our big guy. And they're kind of glued together now. So those center points are kind of like right on top of each other. They're sharing the exact same position inside of our three-dimensional scene. And we also get a little bit more control over this, okay? With our parent-child relationship, we really didn't get any options that would allow us to configure and continue to refine this entire relationship inside the system, right? When we're working with constraints, we do get some options. And I want us to examine the item list for a second. Something has changed here in our item list. What is the change? That little plus sign next to our little target, okay? If we were to expand this little plus sign, we'll start to expose the Modo UI element for a constraint. And there it is. It tells you what type of constraint it is from the item list, and it also tells you which item this little guy is constrained to. So we can just visually see that the little guy is constrained to the big guy, okay? Now, constraints are their own separate item within inside the Modo system. So if we click on it and look down at the Properties tab, you're going to find a whole series of properties for just the transform constraint. Now, this is kind of a bad example as to the options that are available to us for constraints, because with the position constraint, you really don't get a whole lot of options, but other constraints, like the path constraint, has a tremendous amount of features on the inside of that little piece of machinery that will allow us to change how our elements are constrained to each other, okay? So constraints have options. They extend the feature set a little bit more by a couple different leaps and bounds. Pretty cool, huh? It's pretty neat. I love me some position constraints, okay? So in your mind, you use a position constraint whenever you want something to follow another one precisely, okay? Now, these two things aren't parented to each other. They're constrained to each other. So we're linking just the position channels. We still get to change the rotation and scale channels in the transform section of our little guy. Okay. So that's the position constraint. Okay, pretty cool. Really great for complex setups. Yeah? There is. There's a different. Yeah, absolutely. The pivot, it used to be a much larger player inside the Modo system. The pivot point was introduced, I think, like in version 2 or version 3 of Modo, before center points were even really developed. They've kind of gone the way of the dodo bird to a certain degree, because the center point plays a much more important role. You can use the pivot point as kind of a defined area or a defined location within your scene for like a transform handle to go to. So it's something you can use. I don't really use it anymore. Center points have taken over the pivot point in my mind. Yeah?
I selected like all my chain, and when I selected all my chain links, it would show alternating red and blue. Was it located? The centers, like a handle off to the side. Do those mean anything? Are they different from what constraints or what?
Yes, they are different from what a constraint is. I think maybe what you're seeing in that case is one of two things. It's the center point offset, or it's the location of a locator, which is different. A locator is a separate...
Center and locator, so it could show red, blue...
Green, yep, red, blue, green, yep. Yeah. Okay. So let's get rid of the confusion about the difference between a locator and a center point. What is a locator?
Something you can use to make control.
Absolutely. Absolutely. From a technical side, it's just a single point in space. That's all it is, okay? However, a locator is an item, okay? The center point is a component of an item, okay? Make sense? Yeah, a component being like a part, okay? The component of a car would be like the tires of a car or the engine of a car, right? A locator is a car that has its own center point. Okay. And we talked last week about, and you will see this in action here again, the power of locators, because we love locators. It helps us create control surfaces for our rig, and they also give us access to items that we can constrain and do some fun things with. Okay. So how do we delete constraints? Well, deleting constraints is actually so hard, it's easy. Or so easy, it's hard. That's what I meant to say. It's so easy, it's hard, okay? Because a lot of people, they look at constraints like, is there like an unconstrained? How do I unconstrain something? You just delete it, okay? Just delete it, poof, it's gone, all right? It really is quite simple, okay? So I always just kind of right-click on my constraint and then delete. Boop, and everything goes back. And this is the cool thing about working inside of constraints. Unlike a parent, it goes back to its original position within the scene, okay? Okay, check it out. So there's my little guy. It went right back to where it used to be, and this one's still over there. Okay, pretty cool. All right. I'll start working with my little arrow here. And I'm going to turn off my little target and just work with the big target and my arrow. So we've talked about the role of the position constraint. It's physically going to move both items so they're right on top of each other. And then the parent is always, or the driver of that constraint is always going to influence the child of that constraint. Okay? It's not the only constraint that we have access to. Directional constraint, position channels. Okay? Or, excuse me, position constraint, position channels. Directional constraint is going to do what? Think about it. Direction. What are we changing when we change our direction in the scene, just in life? What am I doing right now? If I was an object inside of my 3D scene, what would I be doing? Changing my direction. Rotating. Who said rotate? Jose gets the gold star for the day. Yes, rotate, okay? So the position constraint changes the position values, and the directional constraint is going to change the rotation values, and only the rotation values. So what we're going to do in this example is that I'm going to get my little arrow pointing at my circle, okay? I'm not going to change its location, so its position within the scene. I just want that arrow to point at the center of my circle, okay? So let's just do it real fast. Before we get too much further, let's just kind of analyze what we have. There's my little guy, okay? Here's my big circle. Here's my arrow, okay? Here's my arrow. Now, we have to look very carefully at the orientation of all these elements together. Really what I want is that I want my big target, or my big circle, to turn into a target, right? And I want my arrow to point in the center of the ring, okay? The center of the ring, that's the goal, center of the ring. Excuse me. Let's look at the arrow a little bit more closely here. And specifically, I want you to analyze the local orientation of the center point on my arrow. Perfect. Love it. It can be. I'm happy with it in the center because I want the rotation of my arrow to happen at the center of the arrow. Okay? But the rotation constraint is going to start to rotate this object. And basically, the center point of my arrow is going to rotate itself to automatically look at the center point of my target. Okay? Let me show you what this looks like. I want my arrow to point at my target. So which one of these do I have to select first? The arrow. Let's select the arrow. Hold down the shift key or the control key. Command key. There we go. Come on, fingers. Yeah. Sometimes my pen just haunts me. There we go. And with them selected in item mode, I can enable the rotation constraint. Oops, we had it backwards. And you almost always know if you have it working the right way when things don't work the way they should. What's going on here? Am I not grabbing the arrow? Why is this not working? Hold on a sec. That one. That one. Oh. I've been saying the wrong one. And this is my fault. This is my fault. I've been saying rotation constraint because it's right below position. We want direction constraint. Direction, 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 direction. I'm sorry. Although the rotation constraint would still work. On that note, I mean, look at the rotation constraint, okay? Since we're here, let's just talk about it. The rotation constraint is real easy to figure out. Wherever I rotate after the constraint's been applied, okay, it's just going to influence the rotation, okay? Okay, that's cool. That's all it's doing. So the rotation values of my big target are now influencing and driving the rotation values of my arrow, okay? Kind of like a cool little steering wheel type thing here. So that's the rotation constraint. But that isn't where I was going with my initial example. I apologize for the confusion. Now that we've gotten the rotation constraint out of the way, let's talk direction. Mr. May.
Focus on the rotation just for a second.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you, since you can do it, since it's at a 1-to-1 ratio of when you rotate the main constraint, the arrow then rotates with it.
Yeah.
Is it possible to gear it down so that as you rotate it, you have the arrow rotate at half speed?
Absolutely, absolutely. Now let's look at the actual constraint itself. Okay. The answer to your question is yes, absolutely. We're going to come back to that idea though, because I don't want to overload people with too much stuff initially. We're going to create something a little bit later on called a user channel, which will allow us to do that. Yes?
Did you use the rotation constraint on your train? Is that what you used to do?
In many ways, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. Okay, so I'm going to delete my rotation constraint here. That's kind of an easy one to work with, all right? And things get returned back to the way they were. I'm just going to reset everything on my guy. There we go. And we're kind of back to its original configuration. Perfect. So now let's talk about the direction constraint. I'm sorry. I want my arrow to point at my target, okay? Like it really would in that, if this was, a bow and arrow. Imagine there's a medieval archer here, okay? Who's currently wearing a cloak of invisibility, which is why you can't see him in my scene, okay? That's where my brain goes. All right, so the directional constraint is physically going to orientate the entire arrow to look at the orientation of the big guy's center point, okay? The same rules still apply. The same selection process is what we're going to be using here. So I'm going to select my arrow, select my big ring, and then do direction. Boom. Now, did this work?
It's facing the same direction as the circle, but not toward the circle.
Yeah. So it kind of worked. Let's figure out why we're not getting the result that we want. Because the tip of the arrow isn't necessarily facing the tip or the inside circle, the center of my little target here. Okay. And let's look exactly what's going on. All right. So if you look at my arrow, or let me show you the product real fast. This is what we gain. Okay. So wherever this guy goes, my arrow is going to look at it. Okay. Doesn't matter where in the scene, it's always going to be looking right at that target, okay? Even if it goes to the other side, woo, okay, the arrow is going to change its orientation, all right? But let's look a little bit at specifically what the arrow is doing, because that's not the result that I wanted. but it is performing and doing exactly what it's designed to do, okay? Let's check out the arrow. Now, look very, very carefully at the center point of the arrow. What do you notice is going on here? Are you sure it's the Y? Which Z? Yes, thank you. And that's perfectly right. Mr. May has it right. You hit the nail right on the head. Okay. That little light, it's actually kind of a light purpley line. Okay. It's going strictly directly in to the positive Z indicator line on the center point. Okay. What we're doing when we're working with the directional constraint is that we're basically telling the positive Z orientation of that object to look at the center point of whatever it's attached to. So it's only going to be using the positive Z orientation. Now we do have some options in here, okay? Because what axes should we be using if I wanted the tip of the arrow to be pointing at my target? X, okay? And this is where the power of constraints come in, because we have some options that allow us to change and toggle this on the fly. If I grab my directional constraint here, check it out. Over here in my options, there it is. We're programming the positive Z direction at the moment to look at the center point of the connected element, right? But we get to change this, okay? What would happen if I went in and changed this to X? Yeah, we're probably going to get the result that we're after, because now, boom, there it is. Okay. Now the X orientation, look what's changed. Look at the icon, okay? The icon in the center of the scene, right there, that little purple line is going into the positive X-axis indicator on the center point, okay? So if we took this one step further, went back into my constraint, changed it to Y, yeah, not exactly what we're looking for, but we get to change this interactively on the fly. Let's put it to X. There we go. And now, wherever this guy goes, the arrow's always going to look at it. Okay. Pretty cool, huh? Pretty cool. Constraints give us a tremendous amount of power within the side of our system, because now instead of linking entire items to each other, we're only influencing certain channels within that item. Last week we were about global connections, connecting entire items. This week we're connecting just specific channels of items to each other. Make sense? All right. Yes, sir. Now, are you talking about the axes? Yeah. Go back up into your work plane options at the top of the screen. And it's in that pull-down menu right there. Draw axes. Yep. And let me turn mine off. All right. All right. Get used to seeing these little light blue or light purpley lines inside the interface. They're just indicators of connections, of constraints, okay? It's really the only time inside the Moto system that you're going to see those little light blue lines between the items. And it's a nice visual reinforcer that those two items now have a physical connection, and they're drawing that connection with the line, okay? Pretty cool, huh? So we've talked about the position constraint. We talked briefly about the rotation constraint. My bad, didn't mean to do that. And then, of course, we talked about the directional constraint. There's also one other constraint that I want to talk about, and it's the path constraint. I'm a big fan of path constraints, because path constraints allow us to move objects around in our scene a little bit more intuitively. If you've had some experience working in the animation industry, or if you've had personal projects where you've had to move an object along a very complex kind of maze, okay, you know how crazy it is to work inside of the position channels. Okay, let me show you what I'm talking about. Let me show you how difficult it can be to animate certain elements inside of our app. Okay, I'm going to go back to my big target here, and I'm simply going to reset its rotation values. There it is. Okay, And I'll just reset everything. I'll put it back to its kind of setup pose. Now what I want to do is I want to rotate this little guy. So I want to rotate my target here so that it's doing some kind of curve like this. Okay? That's what I want the motion path for this object to be. And at times, getting these kind of curves in our motion path can be tough. They can be really tough. Case in point, let me show you what I'm talking about. I'm just going to go through using traditional keyframe animation techniques, and I'm going to try my damnedest to get this to go in a gigantic S curve. Okay? So let's just do it real fast. I'm going to go into item mode, and let's just move this guy around. Okay? And I'm going to just put a keyframe on X, Y, and Z. Now I'm just moving this. That's all I want to do. Okay? Actually, I don't want it along the Y. I don't want this to move up and down. I just want to move it X and Z. So there's a keyframe. I'll go forward, I don't know, 20 frames or so. And I'll move it over here. Remember the S, right? And I'll move forward another 40 frames, or 20 frames. I'll move it over there. And then I'll move forward another 20 frames, and I'll move it where I want it to go. Okay? And that's what we get. Not exactly the animation that we're after, right? If you look carefully, what does it do? Zigzag. It's more of a straight line than anything else, right? It really kind of is doing something like this. Huh? Yeah, we need the graph editor, and at times the graph editor just makes you want to pull all your hair out, okay? Yeah, it turns into this monumental cluster pretty fast, and you're like, no, I'm done, okay? Just to do something really redonkulously simple like this, right? Thus enter the role of path constraints. Welcome to the promised land. You guys are going to love me for this. You're also going to hate me because in the past I've tortured you guys without this awesome feature, okay? But like everything, there's a method to my madness, okay? Path constraints. What we're going to do is that we're going to draw a curve. We're going to draw a curve that matches the motion path that I want my little guy to follow. Imagine that we're kind of making railroad tracks, and we're then going to constrain my target to those railroad tracks, okay? Just like a train. Let's do it real fast. Huh? It's asteroids? Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. Pew, 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 pew. My little guy there, yeah. Sound effects required. Okay, so let's, now this curve has to be on its own item, because remember, constraints happen at an item-to-item level. So we're never going to be able to constrain a polygon to an item. Got to be on their own thing, right? So let's make a new item real fast. I'm simply going to hit the N key for new and create an empty mesh item within my scene. And then opening the model tab will gain entry into our curve creation tools. Now, I don't necessarily talk a lot about curves inside of my 3D modeling classes. That's not to say that they're not useful. Actually, I find them incredibly useful. I use them a lot. We just simply don't have enough time. The curve tools are buried. Kind of difficult, actually, to find. Well, it's not difficult to find them, but they're not in a place that you would think they would be, okay? The curve tools are nested inside of the pen tool, okay? So if we left-click and hold, check it out. These are the 3 curve types that we have access to. This first one is called a Hermite curve. And some people get a little confused when they're working with the Hermite curve because it doesn't necessarily behave the way the pen tool works over in Photoshop, okay? The Hermite curve is actually one of the original curve types that was generated way back in the 80s, okay? It's been around forever. It's one of the originals, okay? And when you're drawing a Hermite curve, it requires 3 points to create an arc, okay? So you left-click once, you get a dot in space. It's right there. You left-click again, you get a straight line, but you left-click again for the 3rd time. Now we've got ourselves a curve, okay? As with all the Modo tools, whenever you see a light blue cube, that allows us to interactively change the location of that point while the tool is still active. So we absolutely can go through and continue to customize these, just like the pen tool. If we wanted to continue to draw the curve, we just need to make sure that the last point within the curve is selected. because clicking outside the curve now is going to generate a new point based on that person's position. Yoink, like there. Okay? If we had this one selected, so this is not the last point in my curve. If I was to click over here, look what happens. Okay? So it's always going to generate a new point along our curve based on whatever point is selected. Okay, so let's just edit these real fast. I like Hermite curves. I like them a lot, actually. Hermite curves allow us to work, or what we gain are just very, very smooth curves. It's really, really difficult with Hermite curves to get any sort of hard edge, a corner, a faceted transition between two planes, okay? It's always going to be nice and smoothy, okay? I don't like that, okay? They can be at times a little bit hard to wrangle, okay? Because they don't exactly work the way your brain thinks they're going to work, but just hang in there and you'll find that they'll work pretty intuitively after some practice. Okay. All right, oops, that's good enough. Good enough for government work. And I probably should have said that on my live stream, but whatever, it's Friday. Okay, so there's my S-curve. There's my gigantic S-curve. Like all tools inside of Modo, once you drop the tool, you're done, 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 done. Okay, so just make sure that your curve is kind of dialed before you drop the tool. However, one thing that I kind of discovered after years and years and years of toiling with curves is that you still can edit them after they're done, after you drop the tool. This is kind of neat, actually, because what we're actually physically creating at the location of all these little blue squares are vertices, okay? So if we were to drop the tool and then go, oh man, I didn't want an S, or that looks nothing like what I want, simply going back into your vertex selection mode will allow you to grab some verts, okay? And they're there, but at times they're difficult to see. So let's turn on show vertices. There we go. So they're there, and you can still move them and change your curve, okay? So you do get a certain degree of flexibility with these tools after the fact, okay? You can't add points, though, but you can edit the ones that are there. Yeah, you can only add and remove points, or actually, you can remove points just by selecting them and deleting them. But you can only add tools while the tool is still active.
So how is this different from the pen tool? If we use the pen tool?
The pen tool is, well, it's not going to give you curves. The pen tool is only going to give you straight lines, okay? This is curvy.
Or the Bezier?
Bezier, a little bit different, and that's the second type of curve that I wanted to show. The Bezier tool works identically to the way a traditional Bezier curve would be generated, like a la Photoshop. Okay, so it's kind of nice that we get them in here because Bezier curves allow us to mix and match because we can have some control vertices along our curve that produce a corner and others that produce a curve. So that's kind of nice. Okay, yeah.
Could you merge those two curves together?
Maybe. Give it a try, see what happens. Just real quickly. Okay, Bezier curves, same rules apply. So if you left click and drag as you're drawing the control vertice, you can get those control handles, okay? Huh? You can add points. Yeah, you're always adding, okay? However, if you go over to your tool options, you can see that if we change the mode to like delete, anytime we click on a control vertice, it's going to delete it. Yoink, it's gone, okay? Bye-bye. Say again? It's you can also edit. I know some people like to make their points and then edit them. Okay, like traditional Bezier curves, these tangent handles can allow you to get curves. You can break their tangency by, holding down the option key, I think. Not option. Is it control? It's control. And you can break their tangent handles and control them independently. Oops. Here we go. I'm still holding the control key down now. And then there it is. If the tangent handles match the line, you'll get a corner. Okay. Is it as good as the implementation of Photoshop? No, but I'm happy it's there. Photoshop really, I think Photoshop really does have the best implementation of a Bezier curve. It's quite good, and that's just because they've been doing it for like 30 years. You know, it should be good. They have what, this is like, you know, CC, Photoshop CC is like what, the 16th or 17th version of Photoshop. So I would expect after a history like that, that their tools should be pretty rock solid. Okay. Curves are just like any other item inside of Modo. Okay. So we can select them. Here's the Bezier curve. It's a little bit, you even get access to move all of the control vertices, or excuse me, the tangent handles of the Bezier curves just by grabbing these guys. Okay. So a nice degree of flexibility still after the curve has been edited. If you want to delete a curve, there's a couple ways you can do it. The way I always do it is just go into polygon mode or edge mode. And well, in this case, edge is only going to allow you to select one portion. Double-clicking on it will select the entire edge. However, if you just go into polygon mode, you can see that the rollover highlight will automatically select the entirety of that curve with one click. So saves you a little hassle. I always go into poly mode.
Even though it's not polygon.
It still works, yeah. Yeah, I don't get that either, but whatevs. Whatevs. Okay, so I don't want my Bezier curve. I think I'm just going to continue to use my Hermite curve. So let me hit the delete. Oops. There we go. Huh? Well, we've created, yeah, we haven't affected the target yet. We've just created the path, the railroad tracks, if you will, that our target's going to follow. That's all we've done, okay? Now that we have our curve, okay, and FYI, you have to do this with either a Hermite curve or Bezier curve, okay? You can't do this with polygons, okay? Looking for a curve type. Oh, one other thing. You guys are going to stumble upon this, and I know you guys are going to ask me questions about it. So let me just kind of nip it in the bud, okay? There are very few things that you're not allowed to do in Modo, and very few things that I will instantly fail you if I catch you doing them, okay? Hermite curves, yay! Bezier curves, yay! Sketch tool, I will fail you, okay? Don't use the sketch tool, okay? I don't know why this is in here. It is just, it's useless. I guess it's cool, you know, but this is what it allows you to do. Sketch out a curve, okay? That's stupid, okay? Huh? See, and this is why it's stupid, okay? Yes, you can, it will work as a path, but this is why it's stupid. Okay, oops. Hold on a sec, let me get rid of it. So you can sketch things out, which I'm sure is kind of nice for some people, okay? You can sketch things out. It's just incredibly difficult to control and edit after the fact. See, I can't go in and interactively select those control vertices while I'm in edit mode to kind of monkey its position, okay? So it's kind of a one-trick pony. It allows you to draw a curve quickly, but editing that curve after the fact, a little bit of a challenge, okay? And you don't get to control how many control vertices are being placed along that curve, okay? So it's just, in my mind, it's like, why wouldn't you just use a Bezier curve or a Hermite curve, okay? Yeah, it's going to take a little bit longer to make, but what you get is a tremendous amount of control. I know why it's there, but it's not a good reason why. Okay? Yeah, I should. They should listen to me more. Although I am very proud of myself. I think I've mentioned a couple times in here that I was asked to join the beta team, which is another thing I probably should not have just said on the live stream there. Oops. That's okay. Actually, I think you're allowed to tell people they're a beta tester. You just can't show people the beta software. And I found a bug in 7.01, and they fixed it. So I was happy about that. I feel like I contributed a little bit to the most recent service pack. Woo! Because of my efforts, I made it better. I made it better. So you're welcome. You may buy me a cup of coffee now. Okay, let's get back to our path constraint, all right? We have our curve. Now we're ready to get this entire action taking place, okay? The same selection rules apply, okay? So we want to select the curve first and then, excuse me, the target second. Let me jump over into item mode real fast. Item mode, curve, okay? curve, and at times, admittedly, it is difficult to see if your curve is selected, but really pay attention. The location of the control vertices, they have gone gold, and then I would just purely rely upon the item list selection highlight over there. That's a nice visual reinforcer that the curve has been selected, and I'll make it easy for you guys to understand. Curve, okay. All right, so now let me grab that one, the target, and oops, maybe I have it backwards. I had it backwards. So you guys select the target first and then the curve, okay? Target's the child of the curve, and then hit the path constraint. Ta-da! Okay, pretty cool. What's happened? The target's on the path now, okay? However, when we start animating this, it doesn't do anything, right? Boo.
When you selected the path, what if you wanted the target to go on the other side?
Oh, the other end, good question. We're going to come to that in 2 seconds. Absolutely, okay? So if I scrub my timeline downstairs in my, or scrub my playhead in my timeline, ain't nothing's going to happen, right? The only way to get my target to physically follow the path is to open up the constraint. This is an option. So if we examine the constraint options over in the item list, here it is, path constraint. If we click on it, down in our properties tab, we have some options here. Some options that allow us to animate my little guy cruising along my path. Okay? Now the one that we want to work with is the path percentage. FYI, these are sliders, by the way. Okay, so don't forget, those are sliders. So if I was to zoom out and interactively change that value, pretty cool, huh?
What exactly is it doing?
So what it's doing, and that's a great question, Jessica. If we examine the item here, okay, the positive Z orientation of that item is now following the path. If you look carefully, you can just barely see the positive Z indicator for that item. Okay, it's cruising out this way. So that it's always going to be orientating the positive Z indicator along that path. Okay. And if we were to continue to change the percentage of completion, it's going to follow that path. Let me zoom out a little bit. I'm going higher. So at the beginning would be 0, okay? And then if I go all the way to 100%, it's going to go down there. Kind of like a railroad track.
So what is it calculating the proportion of the...
Yeah, great question. Absolutely. So
I was confused when we were doing that in Maya. I was like,
what is it doing? Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So it's just taking the length of our path and it's chopping it up into small little percentage points. Okay, it's figuring out the distance that it's traveling, and when the percentage is at 0, it's at the beginning. When it's at 100% complete, if you will, it's at the end of the path. Okay, yeah.
Can you do this with like walk cycles or anything like that?
You could absolutely. You could absolutely. I would not do it for the certain components of your character, like the arms, the legs, the body, and stuff. But on most characters, there's going to be a global locator, the root control. You absolutely could constrain that global control to a path, and then your character is just going to like walk around in a circle pretty quickly. Yeah, yeah, that's a good way of doing it for sure. Yeah, John.
I remember this in Henry's class, we did this for moving his path and make him go faster.
Yep, yep.
So the animated pattern, you just go down the timeline and do the percentage.
You got it. So to animate it, what we're physically animating here is the path percentage. So if I was to put a keyframe on frame 1 here at a value of 0%, and then go to frame 60 and change it to 100%, play my timeline. Yeah, there it is. You also get some really cool controls in here. I'm just going to turn off my animation here temporarily. You also get wrap, which is kind of neat. Wrap is kind of neat. So it goes, and then once it gets to the end, it'll start back over. Yeah, so that's kind of cool. This is really kind of cool. Here's a little trick for you guys. Going into our homework, you're going to be making a little planetary defense turret. okay, for your homework, so you can shoot down your alien aircraft. All right. So your alien is attacking planet Earth, right? Little spaceship that I gave you, right? How do you think your spaceship's going to fly?
Around, orbiting around.
Orbiting around.
On a
But what
path.
if you make a path? Then the animation of that spaceship is really easy, right? Because then you're just making kind of like a little flight path for your spaceship to follow, and then you're animating one thing. Okay? We've distilled a very complex movement into something that's very simple with our rigging tools. Okay? Also gives you a lot of control as to how you can work with all this stuff, or how a lot of control in the edit phase to make it work the way you want it to work, the path. Okay. All right. So you're gonna have your planetary defense turret, right? So because we want to shoot down, of course, the invading alien horde. Okay. We can't have them take over planet Earth. We must defend ourselves. Defend yourself. We got to do that. Okay. So if we use this wrap function, this is an old school technique and trick for firing bullets, okay? Because on our turret, right, we want to have the bullets fire down the trajectory of the barrel, right? So if we have just a single path coming out of our barrel, wherever the barrel of the gun goes, so does that path, and then we can have one like sphere path constrained to that path, and just have it on wrap mode. And you can do, yeah, exactly. And then you're animating again the path percentage to like 2,000%, and it's going to look like you're going with a whole bunch of bullets. Okay, old school. And wherever the turret goes, so does the bullet. Okay, yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. Old school technique. Old school technique.
So rigging and shooting has nothing to do with particles.
We're going to keep it real easy. We're going to keep it real easy. Is it going to be a totally realistic result? No. Okay. But it'll still look pretty cool. It'll be fun. All right. Questions so far?
So, needed space,
Let's take a break. We'll come back in and we'll talk about the homework. We'll answer all those questions together as class. Okay? Let's take a break.
So you need a UFO and then
I've given you the UFO. It's on the resources section. Yeah.
And then a base for that protecting from the UFO.
Yeah.
is required.
And we're going to make our own. We're going to make our own little turret. You're going to find in the Luxology content, there's a whole bunch of spaceship parts that come with the program. And so we're going to do something called kit bashing, where we take all these little pieces and we'll make a little turret out of them.
Okay, I'm sorry, I don't understand that the terrence mean, the English term.
Turret. Yeah. Well, I can show you.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
A turret. No, that's quite okay.
It's not in my brain's library.
Turret.
Yeah.
All right. So let's do, it's under vehicles, I think. Spacecraft. So you look at all these parts and pieces. So a turret is just going to be like missiles,
Oh, I see.
or this is where here we go, like a turret, like a gun.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're going to shoot down our alien.
Also, create the bullets and stuff.
Yeah,
Oh,
you could
okay.
if you wanted to. That'd be cool. That'd be cool. So it just has to look like a turret. Something that looks like a weapon. That's we're shooting down.
Okay.
The alien
No
aircraft.
character, just the
Nope.
the
Nope.
UFO and then
You got it.
turret
You
and
got
then
it.
Something.
Yep. And I'm also going to ask you to make a very small little scene. So like in the past, I had a student. I'll show you the example here.
Oh, good.
The past, some of the students have made like a little cityscape just with cubes, and the spacecraft is like flying in between all the skyscrapers,
Yeah.
and then they're firing the turret at them.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be fun. It's a fun little animation. All with constraints. We're going to do 100% of this with constraints.
That sounds interesting.
All right, perfect. Actually, let me find that file real fast. Yes.
For my chain thing, I had everything attached ready to go, but it's not showing up in the render window as texture.
not showing up in the render window as a texture. Okay, hold on 2 seconds. Let me do this real fast, and then I give you a hand. Okay. Just want to find. Yeah, here we go. Okay, let me give you a hand. All right, Mr. Wilson, what do you got?
Oh, I think.
Oh, is it Greg? Yeah. I'm sorry, Greg. I was looking down at my monitor, and your voice sounded remarkably like Mr. Wilson's.
Huh.
I apologize.
Yeah, I've got these things set to the concrete texture
Uh-huh.
from within Moto.
Perfect.
And it looks all good here, but then when I go to the render window or the render,
Uh-huh.
nothing shows up here.
Yeah. Okay, let's see what's going on. Let's see what's going on. All right, whenever I'm... Well, so this is your concrete. What happens if we just deactivate it? Nada. Nada. Okay, interesting. Here's what I want to do. Can you hold down your shift key for me?
Yeah.
I'm going to take all of those elements, pull them out of that. You can let go shift.
Okay.
Cool. Just going to pull them out of that folder. No change. Okay. Now, I'm wondering if it is. No, it shouldn't be, because that is very, very interesting. Okay, here we go. Let's try this. What if we do effect, final color output? No, interesting. Okay. All right.
From what I know, that should be textured.
Okay, let's see what's going on here. If I change the base shader, like something outrageous. Interesting.
Could it be something with the camera?
It may be something with the camera. Let's see what's going on. Let's put this back to shading. Interesting. This is a good one, Greg. Got it. Somehow, your base shader got down here at the bottom. This needs to be up top. There it is. The base shader is responsible for drawing basically everything below it. There it is.
Oh, okay.
There it is. Yep. Cool. You're on your way. Stop.
Stopping.
Stop. Go into After Effects. You did the one thing you were not supposed to do. Okay. Go File, Import. File.
Open files or
Nope,
file?
just File. Because what we want to do, instead of grabbing all of them, I want you to grab just the first one in that sequence.
Let's see, where are they?
In your Downloads folder?
Yep.
All right.
Flash drives don't seem to work on school computers, so I
Cool.
just have it all on the copy site.
Perfect. I love it. That
yeah.
works perfectly. Okay. I'm happy with that. I'm very happy with that. So with image sequences, just grab the first one. See how it says, oh, you're a sequence.
Oh,
Hit open.
sick.
Now, hit ignore. Okay.
Okay.
There it is. There she blows. Double click on it. Ah, there's your guy.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Is that the way it's supposed to look?
Yes.
Perfect. Good animation too. Great job. So here's what I want you to do now. Do you remember the next step in this?
Export?
Well, no, not really. Let's do this. Go into composition, and I want you to go add to render queue. Yep. Perfect. See how it says untitled color output? Perfect. Perfect. Okay. Now, how do we change? The output module is responsible for drawing the QuickTime file, right? Do you remember which preset we're using? Click on the arrow. And we're using,
QuickTime, right?
yeah, we're going to use QuickTime.
Does it matter which one? Or?
It does matter. Why isn't H.264 showing up on this list? Interesting. It should have. Okay. I tell you what. Click out of here for me really fast and click on the word lossless. Okay. Under Format Options, can you click on that? And then under where it says Video Codec Animation, yeah, click on that one for me. All right, here we go. And let's use H.264.
Sweet.
There we go. Hit OK. And then OK one more time. And then the output 2 is going to establish the name and the location of the file. Click on the yellow text. Yeah.
Sweet.
So give it a good name. Know where you're saving it. And then when you're done, hit the render button. And you should be able to, you should be done.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So when you have to, you said you have to keyframe each individual link on all 3 channels each time?
Yeah, that'd probably be the easiest. Rotation. Yeah.
I went to the Red Fest last week. Boomtown, Water Wheel.
Nice.
For
Very cool.
grader class.
I love it. That's awesome.
I got probably about 75 pictures just from the water wheel parts, things like that.
Sweet. That's awesome. That's exactly what you want, right? Yes. Let's take a look, see what we got.
So, can I, tell me the
Yeah.
next, I can move on.
Yeah, good. Good. I think we're going in the right direction here, Tomoko. I think the only suggestion that I would make moving forward, perfect, really comes at the beginning of your animation. Check it out. I think your end from like here on,
Yeah.
or right about 240, really good timing. I like that. I would probably drive the arc of my chain a little bit more. I'd have it bend a little bit more.
Okay.
Yeah, so something kind of like that, a really much larger arc.
Okay.
The speed of the movement's fine.
Oh, the
Speed is fine. I'd change the pose of it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's good though. I like it a lot. Great job.
And I don't notice it until you say something about it. Yeah.
Alrighty, folks, we're back. Okay. So, alrighty, guys, let's get back together real fast. Okay. I want to spend just a moment talking about the homework for this week. And you're going to have some time in class to really start to begin this project, because I recognize firsthand that it's going to be a little bit of work, okay? So I want to give you an opportunity to really kind of jump in and start this today together as a class. That way, if you have questions, you have access to me, and we can get them resolved pretty quickly, okay? I want to start off just by kind of zeroing in and showing you an example of what we're doing here, okay? This is a student product. Hopefully you know Alexander Tadek. He's an amazing artist. He's probably one of our best here coming out of the animation program. He did a really fantastic job on this project last time we offered this course, and I just want to show you what he constructed. Now you got to remember that Alexander was definitely grabbing for the brass ring on every single aspect of this animation. So this is probably how far you can go, but not necessarily how far you will go on this. Okay, so let me show you what I'm talking about. It's a cool little animation. So there's his planetary or desktop defense system. Okay, there's his turret. Now he made that using a little bit of modeling on his part, but he also did some kit bashing, which we're going to do for the first time. If you haven't kit bashed before, it's a tremendous amount of fun. We're going to take a whole bunch of preset parts that come with Modo, and we're going to make something out of just like the stock content by putting them all together, and kind of like Legos. Okay, it's going to be pretty cool. Oops, excuse me. There we go. There's a flying saucer. Activate planetary defense system, or desktop defense system. So he did a good job. Yeah. And then it crashes. Okay? Pretty cool. All right, not too fun, not too bad. One thing about Jessica to ask is that a curve, and I forgot to mention this before, but the curves that we can create over in Modo, they can be 3D curves, okay? So there's our curve, right? Yeah, so there's our curve. We can absolutely, let's go into the curve here, and I'm going to go into my vertex selection mode. You absolutely can move and translate these, into 3 dimensions. So if you want your little spaceship to be, traveling along the y-axis, you can do that pretty easily just by editing these points along the path. And then any animation that you do, yeah, it's just going to always follow that path. Okay, pretty cool. We like very much so. Okay. One other thing, and I forgot to mention this about working with these curves and these path constraints. Let me just very quickly here restore this value back to 100%. So we can kind of scrub through our timeline. Here, let's do this. Oh, one other thing, check it out. Because of my, my directional constraint on my arrow, it's still always looking at the location of my target, okay?
You use this for like eyeball rigs, like look-at constraint?
Often that's how they do it. Yeah, eyeballs are often directionally constrained to a locator that's right in front of the person, right in front of the character. And then whenever they want the person to change the direction with their eyeballs, they're moving one locator and then both eyeballs move, because we don't want our eyeballs to do that. We want our eyeballs and our characters to look in the same direction.
But you also do that with a locator too, where it's always looking at the locator?
That's a locator. It's just a locator, and then they're directionally constrained to that locator, for sure. And remember, a locator is an item, so anything that we can do with a traditional mesh item, we can also do with a locator. Okay. All right. One other thing, I forgot to mention this earlier about working in the path constraints. If you look at your options over here, you do get a number of controls that will allow you to continue to edit your animation. Path offset is kind of an interesting one. It's let me zoom out. Path offset is going to allow you to just basically determine a new starting position. So maybe you want that point along the curve to represent 0, okay? You can do that with path offset. I don't use this very often, but it's there. It's part of the system. Now, roll is kind of neat. Roll is basically going to allow you to rotate your object as it goes along the path. So that's kind of neat, okay? A little bit difficult to see with, oh, here we go. I'll change the axis that is constrained along the path from Z to, let's say, like X. There we go. Check it out. If I zoom in real fast, here we go. And now monkey around with the roll settings, you should see what we're talking about. Okay, allows us to roll that object along the path. Really great for our spaceship because now we can have it like bank into the corners, okay, by animating the roll parameter in addition to the path percentage.
You want it to rotate at the same time.
If you wanted to rotate at the same time, you still get a little bit of control, I believe. Yep, I can still rotate it, okay. Now, I probably would want to change, I definitely want to change, oops, I'm not in item mode, that would help there, Pat. Yep, change your action center to like selection, and then the action handles will always follow your path, okay? Well, they should. If you wanted to get it to rotate, you may have to do something else, because the rotation parameter is being overwritten. Yeah, actually, it is being overridden by the constraint.
Do you animate one whole like rotation, infinite rotation within the timeline of the animation?
You can, yeah. You can, yeah. Absolutely. So you're talking about the path percentage, right?
No, the rotation of, like if it's a spaceship, and you know how spaceships rotate along the x-axis?
Mm-hmm.
The whole time.
The whole time, yeah. Well, let's get a little bit more specific, because I think that actually brings out a really cool solution that we should address together as a class. Because what Jessica wants to do is to take her little spaceship and then to have it follow the path, but also rotate as well, okay? That brings out a really interesting solution. And I'm going to delete my path constraint, and I'm just going to turn off my target, and I'm going to import my little spaceship. If you import a scene file into an existing scene file, check it out. The contents of that scene file are going to come in here, which are pretty cool. All right. So if you look very carefully in my item list now, you can clearly see that I have my spaceship. Okay. But it brought in everything from that spaceship.lxo file, including the cameras and the lights. Now, importing a scene file with an existing camera is no biggie, but it's certainly kind of a huge thing for that light, right? Because that light is going to influence our scene. We now have 2 directional lights, which is going to cause some problems, so I'm going to delete one of them, okay? Yep, absolutely, absolutely. You got it. Okay. So just for illustration purposes, I'm just going to scale this guy down, this item down, so that it fits on my curve. Awesome. And I'm also going to zero out everything so that the item believes that its current size is its 100% scale size. Okay. All right. Walk me through the process of constraining this item to that path. Which is? Spaceship. Yep. And then what? The curve. Then apply the path, right? Joink. Okay. So this is what we get. This is exactly what we expect it to make. There's the path constraint. If we were to increase the path percentage, it flies along. Awesome. We can have it bank in and out now, which is kind of fun. So we can get some really compelling, cool animations by changing the roll. However, one thing that we don't get in this process is the ability to rotate it along the y-axis. Okay, I'm changing the rotation y values on the item, and it's not rotating, spinning like this as it should, right? Why? Why isn't it doing that? Yeah, the constraint is overriding it. Okay, the constraint, the path constraint is determining how it's going to work. Okay, so when we want to get two kind of separate rotation values or two separate effects, this is where the role of a locator can come in. Okay, what we're going to do in actuality is that we're going to create a locator, and we're going to constrain the locator to the path, and then we're going to parent or positionally constrain the spaceship to the locator. Right? That way, the constraint is not influencing the rotation of our spaceship. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Let me get rid of all of this. I'm going to hit an undo here. Okay. All right. So I'm going to create a locator. Boom. There it is at the origin of my scene. I want to take my locator, and I'll just call this spaceship controller. Yeah. Okay. And I'm going to constrain that. Hold down Shift. Path constraint to my curve. Okay. So if I go into my constraint and monkey around with this path percentage, we're getting what we want. Okay. So what do I need to do now? Spaceship to the locator, right? How would we do that? Parent. Let's try parenting it real fast. So here's my spaceship controller. Here's my spaceship. So if I just drag and drop, did it work? Did it work the way it should have? Yes. Okay. They are constrained to each other, but the spaceship did not adopt the location of our locator, right? Say again? Item position. So what Jessica is going for is just matching item position, right? Yeah. Physically moving the spaceship to the location of the locator before we parent it, right? Yes? But we can do better than that, right? What about that position constraint? Remember, when we do a position constraint, we're physically going to move the child object to the parent object and have the parent influence the position values of the child, okay? Let me hit undo to remove the hierarchy that I just made. Okay, so there we go. So here's the child. Here's the parent. I'm going to be very careful to make sure I'm selecting the locator. Position constraint. Okay. Now they're glued together. So when I change the path percentage of my path constraint now, check it out. It's doing what I need it to do. And in this process, we still have the ability to go in and rotate just the spaceship to get the spinning effect. Okay? It's called a compound rig because now we have two separate elements working together to get one effect. Okay?
Could you use roll at all in that properties tab?
Let's find out. So if I go back to my path constraint, that's on my locator, I can roll it. Now why isn't that changing? Yeah, we're not constraining the rotation values of the spaceship to the locator. We're only constraining the position values. Okay, let's try adding in a rotation constraint between the locator and the spaceship. That way, the roll that's on the path constraint influences the spaceship. Now, at times, let's do it real fast. So let me grab my spaceship, hold down the Shift key, grab my locator, rotation constraint. Aha. Interesting. Let's see if it works. If I was to change the roll value, now it works. Okay, however, we probably lose the ability to do this guy. Yeah, we lost all the rotation on the spaceship, so that's going to be a limiting factor. Okay. I think in this particular situation, that rotation constraint only muddies up the water. Okay. It actually kind of completely, it basically, in having both a rotation and a position constraint applied to the locator, we've just made a path constraint. We've overcomplicated the entire system. So I want to remove my rotation constraint. There we go. And then I'll probably just have to hand animate the rotation values for my spaceship to get the result that I'm after. Okay? Because that's pretty easy. I can do that pretty quickly. Pretty cool, huh? However, what would happen? No, yeah, never mind. Questions?
Can you control how many times you want it to rotate?
Yeah, absolutely. Just by numerically entering in those values. So if you wanted to rotate 10 times over the course of 100 frames, what would be the degrees of rotation? 10 revolutions, so 10 times 360. Yeah, 3,600 degrees of revolution. And then I'll spin 10 times. Okay, so for the kit bashing portion, let me show you how to make the turret, or how you can make the turret, okay? I'm not expecting you guys to spend a lot of time modeling this week. I don't want you to model. I want you to animate and render and continue to get more accustomed to working inside of the pipeline that we've been establishing over the last couple of weeks. So let me show you how to do the turret part. It's really easy. If you go to the Layout tab, Layout, at the bottom of the screen here, you're going to get our little preset browser, okay? And one of the presets that we have access to are mesh presets, okay? So I'm in the Meshes tab, okay? And this little navigation menu will allow us to very kind of quickly navigate vertically across the hierarchy of this. These are all basically folders, by the way. And to find all of the science fiction stuff, go into Vehicles, okay? And then you'll see all the subfolders, Spacecraft, and then here are all the parts and pieces. Okay, they're really cool. There's a whole bunch of them. Yeah, they're really kind of professionally made. They're really kind of quite neat. And if you look carefully down at the bottom here, you know, you're free to use your imagination. I'm not going to limit you to, I'm not going to tell you how to make your turret. There's a lot of pieces in here that we absolutely can use to make a pretty compelling turret instantly. Okay, I'll leave it up to you and your own creativity to design this how you'd like. But simply double-clicking on any one of these mesh presets is automatically going to load that mesh preset in at the center of our scene. Okay, so there it is. So there's one.
Are they UV already, or do you have to use
I don't know. No, they're not UV'd. Oops. Hold on a second. Why did it jump me out into a new scene? There we go. I think I had something else selected. So, you know, as an example here, there we go. See, I don't want the engine. I don't like the engine, so I'm going to delete the engine. Maybe I want some sort of cool science fiction base. I don't know. I'm just making this up as I go along here. That'll work as a base. So then I can like rotate this and move it, scale it down. Make something that looks cool. There's kind of a groovy stand, right? And then maybe I put, I don't know, maybe I put that in there. Whoa. Done. Let's make that a little bit smaller. And then I'll rotate it into position here. Yeah, when I defend my planet, you know, I go big or go home. Yeah, so you can just very quickly make something that's kind of cool looking. There we go. Shoot, I'll just duplicate that guy. Huh? Make it 3? I can do that. Awesome. I'm missing one? Yeah, right. All right. If you want me to do it, I'll do it. There we go. There's my little turret. Okay. So your challenge in this is to figure out how to craft a rig that allows you to very easily animate these complex models into a simple machine. Okay. So let me walk you through some suggestions that I would make. Okay. Now, whenever you're designing any rig with a custom model, okay, you have to start breaking down this model into the parts that you know are going to move, okay? based on what you can see here, what parts are going to move on my object, on my turret. Say again? The guns, absolutely. Okay, so I need to ensure, and I did some excellent cloning here. So imagine that's perfectly in the center, okay, and I perfectly rotated that. Just pretend. Bear with me. All right. So if these things are going to move independently, they have to be on their own item, okay? However, I know that these two things are probably going to move together like this, okay? So they can be combined. So here, I'm just going to grab, let's see. Which one's that? That's the top one. So that's, okay. So I want to grab all of these guys and just paste them. Yeah, now they're all in one. Okay. So let's just name this like horizontal guns. There we go. And then in item mode, that's the movement that they're going to have. Okay. Also, this base is probably going to move, or definitely at least components of this base are going to move. So we get to make some decisions here. Let's just call this base.
That can be the parent and the guns can be the children.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think on my base, I want to have all of this move together as a piece. Okay, so I want to Command X, make a new mesh item, Command V. I'll call this base top. Okay, so I got the base, which is pretty much all of that in there. Okay, and I also got to get the space hatch. Space hatch, I'm going to, let's just do it real fast. Command X, Command V to paste it together. So now I got on my base, it's all of that stuff that's blinking on and off. Okay, the base top is just going to be the center section here, and that's going to rotate. That's going to allow me to rotate my guns like this. Okay, and then the actual guns will move up and down like that. Okay. So let's just make the system here. The base top is going to be parented to the base. The guns are going to be parented to the base top. Okay. That way, when I move my base, almost nothing comes with it. It would help if I was in item mode, and this is something that every one of us is going to struggle with this as we go through this process. If you're doing a lot of modeling and then while you're kind of rigging at the same time, you got to remember to go back into item mode to check your hierarchy. Now that I'm in item mode, yeah, that all moves the way it's supposed to. Okay, because then I can grab the base top, rotate it. There we go. Whoops, I'm on the wrong item. There we go. And that will move, okay? And then the horizontal guns will move like that, okay? As an example. So you got to break down a complex system into the parts that you know you want to move, okay? If it's going to move, it's got to be on its own item, because as we know already, items are the only things that animate, okay? Yeah.
How about camera angle? Camera angle and close up and zoom in, zoom out can animate it?
Absolutely. Animate all the camera stuff. You saw that in the example. Yeah. Camera is just an item, right? Camera is an item just like any other item. So you'd follow the exact same process that you would if you were animating the turret of my little guy here. So cameras are a little bit more difficult in that, at times in certain viewports you're not going to see them. I'm in the setup tab here, and I'm going to go into visibility and turn on show cameras. So there's my camera. So if I wanted to make an epic sweeping camera motion here, let's just move it into position. Here's kind of a cool production trick. If you're at the point when you're ready to start animating a camera, here's what I do, and I find it really, really helpful, okay? I like hanging out in the animation window when I'm animating things, okay? Because, you know, we have all of our animation tools down here, but I like having a perspective viewport so I can see my scene, but I also like having a viewport that shows me what the camera is seeing too, okay? So here's kind of a cool little trick. This is one of those tricks that I wish someone would have shown me when I was in y'all's shoes, okay? Because this used to drive me crazy. Have you ever wondered what that little gold dot in the upper left-hand corner of your open GL viewport does?
Gives you another window.
Yeah, it gives you another window. And here's kind of the cool thing. If you hold down what I believe is your command key, it may be the control key. If you hold down the command key and then drag to the right, okay, it is the control key. There we go. If you drag to the right, it's going to split that viewport into two horizontally. Okay? So now I have two viewports, and I can change this one to my camera, and then I still have this one over here. That way, I can grab my camera and position it and see instantly, oops, there we go, instantly what my render camera is going to see. Oh, I'm inside the barrel. That's a cool shot. Okay, so that's kind of cool. So animating your camera is identical to animating, oops.
In this scene, would you recommend shrinking the machine or scaling up the camera?
Never scale your camera. Never scale your camera. That just causes problems within the system. Leave the camera in its current size and then bring your model down to it, okay? Because the camera is already configured in the real world units of the scene, okay? So and we want to work in as close to the real world unit as we can, right? So we want our camera to be moving 10 feet and to have that be a direct representation of a 10-foot camera movement, okay? The moment we start scaling our cameras, that real world measuring system is just kind of thrown out the window. Because now that 10-foot camera movement is actually like 30 feet out there in the real world, okay? You just generally don't want to scale your cameras at all.
How about switch the camera 1 to camera 2?
Can't do that. Can't. Well, I take that back. You can do that. I wouldn't recommend doing it.
Yeah, never do that.
Yeah. I believe that is a feature that I saw in 701. And I remember playing around with it, and I remember having mixed results with it. Yeah. Yeah, you can do it. Oh, and on that note, here, one other thing about cameras that are really kind of cool. You know, cameras, since they're an item, we can use the same constraint process with cameras as we do with everything else, okay? For example, maybe I want to have a sweeping camera move in here. The easiest and the fastest way to make a sweeping camera move is to have a curve. Okay, so check it out. So this is going to be my camera curve, and I do this a lot, actually. Camera curve, okay. Let me create my curve. Maybe I want my camera movement to start something like that. This would be something that would be historically very difficult to keyframe. Okay. Okay, so there's my curve. So in item mode now, I can, oops, cancel. In item mode, there we go. Grab both of these, make my path constraint. Ta-da! Okay. However, camera's facing the wrong way. So by going into the path constraint and choosing which axis is going to be constrained down the path, I can very quickly, oops, let's do negative axis. There we go. And negative axis here is just going to flip it. So now I got a pretty epic camera movement. Yeah, pretty cool. Pretty cool. That would be rather difficult to keyframe. And this is where the roll really comes into play. And I'm rolling the wrong axis, but with a secondary locator in there, I could resolve that pretty quickly. Let's do local up vector. Sometimes that works.
You can compare type your camera to your turret. And you sort of
Yeah.
better view.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, okay. So if we go back to animate now, yeah, that's what my camera sees over here. It's sideways at the moment. Woo! And it's a little too close for my taste. And I think this is why I love working with all the rigging tools inside of Moto, is that you can create these very complex systems, and then you can edit them. You know, instead of having to reanimate your camera, I'm just changing the position of the curve, and I'm able to recompose my shot. Okay, I don't have to reanimate anything. I don't have to go in and, you know, completely start over again. I can very, very quickly make a change without having to do a tremendous amount of work. If you don't want it to go sideways, I would do that locator thing that I did earlier with the spaceship. So where's my camera? So this is what if I didn't want it to go sideways, I would generate that locator. Here's the locator, and then I'd constrain the locator to the curve, path constraint, okay? And then I would take my camera and I'd constrain it positionally, okay? And now what I'm able to do is still rotate my camera, okay? And then the position, the locator and its constraint is going to influence its, like that. And what we've created here is a two-node camera setup. Yeah, because now I can animate the position going along that curve. Okay, and I can also animate the camera's rotation. So I still get to do that. And I still get to do that. Okay? A lot of power, a lot of control, with very simple setups. I mean, what we've done here is extraordinarily basic. Extraordinarily basic. We're just using we're using these tools creatively to make a more complex scene out of very simple building blocks. Okay? Does everyone kind of understand what the goal of this week's assignment is? Cyrus. Yeah, let's go over the assignment sheet real fast, just so everyone's on the same page. Okay, so you make a turret, free to use mesh library, okay? Also, I would like you to make a simple set, a scene for your animation, okay? Gone are the days of having just these empty, voids that our animations take place within. I want a very simple scene, okay? You saw what Alexander Tadek did with his little desktop scene. That's what I'm talking about. I also had a couple people last year, they made like a very simple city scene with just cubes and just kind of, very basic simple shapes. And then their spaceships were like flying through the skyscrapers and stuff. That's fine. I'm very happy with that. Use your creativity to figure out what this looks like for your own project, okay? Simple scene, okay? Materials and textures for all models, okay? You're free to use the preset library, free to use whatever you want, okay? Very happy with that. Rig, turret to position, rotate, and fire at attacking alien spacecrafts. Using the constraints that we went over today, you should be able to create a turret quickly that tracks the location of your invading alien army. Okay?
Are there any building meshes somewhere in the library?
I don't think so. So just a cube. Just a cube.
Okay.
Very simple. If you spend more than 10 seconds making your city scene, if that's what you want to do, I would be disappointed. Just very, very basic, very simple. Okay. Control surfaces, so make sure you have locators. Okay, locators. Locators, that's going to help you move your objects around your scene. Okay. Animation, 10 seconds long, 10 seconds, so not as long as last week's, 10 seconds. So relatively short. The frame rate's at 24 frames a second. Okay. Animation must include at least one alien spaceship flying through the scene. Turret must track, rotate, and fire at incoming alien spaceships. I'll let you figure out how to do that using the tools and the techniques that we've shown today. The render size is going to be 1280 by 720. 1280 by 720. Okay, I noticed that some of the animations were 720 by 480. Okay, coming into the Dropbox. 1280 by 720. Your 1 week grace period on this parameter has now expired. Okay, I will be holding you to that expectation now. 1280 by 720. All right. In addition, I also want you to render this at a pixel aspect ratio of 1.0 or square. Luckily for you guys, that's the default, so nothing to change there. The render type, image sequence, and global illumination should be on. Okay. When you're done, please compile all of these frames inside of After Effects and render them out using the H.264 codec. All right. Questions? Everyone understands what we're doing? All right. We got about, what? That clock's wrong, by the way. We got about 45 minutes left in class. Let's get to work. Let's hit it. Yeah. Let me stop the live stream, Katie.